join me for the pledge of allegiance?
Do it enough.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And can we have the roll call, please? Acting Mayor Rosa Clark, speaking back here. Council members Jeff Lott Jr.
Here.
Paul Becker. Lucy Krakowiak. Here. John McGilton. Here. And Gerald F. Roberts.
Here.
And Mayor Burien is excused from tonight's council meeting. Before we start with our published agenda tonight, I have some comments to make. I feel that since I recessed the meeting the other night, the people in the city of Burien have the right to know why I took the action that I took. But I will answer here tonight, but I want to put the evening and our normal process into context first. Since 1993, it has never been the practice of council to vote on extremely important issues like a change in Burien city government without research, without discussion at prior meetings, and certainly not with absent members totally in the dark about the issue. Shooting from the hip types of legislation serves no one well. In addition, it has been a long-established practice among Burien City Council members to defer taking action on items that the absent members have an interest in. Discussion of items championed by an absent member has also been delayed until the members return. This is simple courtesy. Of course, if the item was time-sensitive or an emergency, action would be taken. Since 1993, the beginning of the city of Burien, these have been the practices during the terms of 24 different individual council members guided by 6 individual mayors, working with 3 permanent and 3 temporary individual city managers. We have always protected the right of all council members to be involved in a discussion before it is put in the form of a motion for adoption. I have always been proud of the fact that all of these people working together, working through their differences, with the ebb and flow of majority and minority status, have steadily moved the city ahead with the vision and the future as their North Star. But through it all, we have respected the right of each to be included in the conversation. Councilmember Block, like other council members historically, received this courtesy during his recent absence for surgery as well as vacations in the past. Every council member has been granted this courtesy and respect until the August 6, 2012 meeting, when Councilmember Block put a motion on the floor in my absence. Research would have shown him that that motion to take annexation off the ballot would have needed to be made at least 1 month earlier in order to allow the process to work through the King County Council, the only body with the authority over the ballot. On November 19, 2012, 2 members, Mayor Bennett and Councilmember McGilton, were absent. It is true that they were away on personal business. There is not one Burien council member who has ever had perfect attendance. As human beings, they have the right to personal time, to surgery time, and sometimes to traveling on behalf of the city. Every elected official in the country and beyond faces the need to balance public service with their personal lives. On the 19th, the meeting was going well until we reached the point on the agenda where we talk about city business. At this point on the agenda, normally there's no action to take. It is the time at which our city manager routinely updates council and the community of recent developments of note. That would be followed by the annexation issue was dealt with at the ballot box, and that is a different issue from the PAA. And the PAA means potential annexation area. Refusing to acknowledge the lack of respect of two absent council members who pressed on in spite of the fact that during his absences he had received discourtesy. This was not an emergency issue nor one of time constraints. In fact, it can't be done by one simple motion because it involves changing both the Burien City Comp Plan and the King County Comp Plan. It is not the annexation issue that is codified in the documents. It is the PAA which allows Burien a seat at the table in future discussions concerning the future of this area. The complicated process would be long and could not be handled by a simple motion by one council member. A little research on the part of Council Member Block would have shown him this. This motion was seconded by Council Member Krakowiak in spite of the fact that she, in the interest of transparency, always insists that we refrain from placing a motion on the floor and vote on it at the same meeting. And Councilmember Edgar was the third member who voted for this motion. So without research, they voted to withdraw from the PAA as I previously described. At home, I am sure the residents thought the motion passed, but further action will be needed due to the complexities of the issue. Councilmember Block's second motion was to place the idea of Burien having an elected mayor on the April ballot. This is a significant change in the city's charter and has considerable budget implications. Councilmember Block had mentioned this item at one previous meeting because we have been consumed by the budget. And by the budget discussions, the council has not placed the elected mayor item on the agenda for discussion, which would be our normal protocol. Placing a change in our form of government on the agenda would set the table for discussion so that the residents could hear and understand the complexities and budget implications of changing our form of government. After reasoning together and with public input, we would be better able to make a wise decision. A decision on a ballot measure by the public would be the end result. I myself had questions about this, but since it was not on the agenda, I knew staff would not be prepared to help us understand this matter. Then there was the issue of two absent council members who would have had zero input into a discussion to transform Burien's mode of government. I tried very hard to reason with Councilmember Block, hoping he would table the motion until a future date when all council members were present. Rather than allow rash action totally out of order and sequence, I chose to recess the meeting. I am aware that this is the first time in the history of Burien that any presiding officer has recessed in this manner. Recessing with a motion on the floor necessarily means the issue of an elected mayor would be discussed in the future before action is taken. Councilmember Block has inferred that he had a third motion that would cause us to hire 2 additional police officers. What a surprise, since during the budget discussions he wanted to eliminate the school resource officer position historically posted at Highland High School. A little research would have shown him that the SRO position has been instrumental in resolving issues in public safety costs at the Burien Library, the transit-oriented development, cartels, Burger King, as well as the town square condo units. But on a whim, he wanted to reduce that position, but now he wanted to add 2 new positions. And this would be done after the budget for the next 2 years was adopted only a couple of weeks ago. If this indeed was his third motion for the evening, he would have been adding in excess of $250,000 for new officers to our just adopted budget without discussion by the full council. There is a financial cost to placing an initiative on the ballot, and I think that it's at least $30,000. Then there would be the undetermined cost of changing our form of government. Clearly, it was inappropriate to add these expenditures outside the budget process, which just ended a couple of weeks ago, not to mention without having the full council present. So this is why I took the action that I took. I will be giving these comments to our city clerk for inclusion in the October 3rd packet. I want to thank you for listening, and now we will move on to tonight's published agenda, which staff has been preparing for the last month or so. So with that, Mr. Block had a motion, and we do not have that motion in front of us. I do not know if he gave that motion to the staff. So I will ask Mr. Block to restate the motion, and then we can vote on it. And since you had called the question, there's no discussion. You just restate the motion.
Madam Mayor, I point out that to call the question requires, the motion to call the question, to call for the question requires a vote from the council. Section 6.11, a motion to call the question shall close debate on the main motion as undebatable. The motion must receive a second and fails without a 2/3 vote. For 5, and no vote was taken last week. Without a 5 vote required 4 votes. We have 6 here today, 2/3 would still be 4. So in order to close the debate on this, there would need to be 4 votes in favor of calling the question.
I'll refer to our city attorney.
Councilman Robinson is correct. Both under Robert's Rules of Order and under the city's rules of procedure, City Council's rules of procedure, technically, when a call for a question can't just be made by one council member. It should be in the form of a motion that is voted on by the council. Typically, though, in a lot of meetings, that just calling to the question will be used without objection when there's a consensus that there's been enough discussion on a matter. But technically, if the council is not ready to close debate, then a point of order could be made, and the call for question should be made in the form of a motion.
So my calling the question was out of order.
It would have been out of order if somebody had challenged it.
Okay, so I withdraw that.
So then are we to go into discussion of that motion and then vote?
I think first Councilmember Block should restate the motion as Deputy Mayor indicated, and then open the floor for discussion.
Okay, the original motion that I made is at the April 2013 special election, the citizens of Burien shall be given an opportunity to choose between the mayor council form of government or a city manager council form of government.
Okay, and the motion last week was seconded by Councilmember Krakowiak. So I guess we're open for discussion on that motion.
Okay, I'll speak to a couple of things about it. First one is that talking about changing the form of our city government like this is irresponsible without fully studying the question. And I'm rather put off and offended by Councilmember Block's attempt to grandstand, apparently believing it'll gain votes at some point. It's not going to save the city money. What you do is you add another elected position, another position that we pay for an election on, another salary, and you still have to have people that actually do the management work of the city. And it would be irresponsible to go into this on short notice like that. In addition, after fighting so hard to make sure that the annexation ballot was going to go on the general election ballot where there would be more people turning out, now Mr. Block wants to throw it onto a special election ballot in the middle of the spring, right before everybody's income taxes are due. And it just does not strike me as a well thought out or anything that takes into consideration the best interests of the city or the citizens of the city. Thank you.
Councilmember Krokoviac.
Thank you. I support this motion, and I'd like to make an amendment to add some strength to this motion and ask that it be stated in resolution form and that it be numbered as such.
Okay, Councilmember Block. You're speaking to the amendment or no?
I'm speaking to the motion. You know, we've went through a very tumultuous period with an unnecessary call to annex an area to move forward with something that the majority of Burien's residents don't want. That has nothing to add to our city. And as a result, our community has been torn apart. And I made the motion that I made at the original, at the last meeting, with the intent of removing this issue from the ballot. I mean, from contention. The second motion, as I stated, was intended to focus the community on something positive, to bring us together. I feel it was wholly appropriate to bring it up in that context, and I did so. You know, there's been a lot of high talk, Councilman Robinson, about elections, and I want to point out that when I brought up the issue of removing the ballot issue from the annexation ballot issue from the on August 6th, Councilmember Robertson said that it was voter suppression. You know, I want to know why this is voter suppression when we are taking this off the ballot, but not adding this. I think the residents of Burien have and deserve a choice on who they have as their leader and what form of government that we move forward with. And I think that under our present system, the citizens of Burien are ill served. I want to point out that under our present system, all power is vested within the council. The council chooses the executive who runs the city. And as we are all aware from our civics classes when we were in high school, we're supposed to have three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. And vesting all the power in one branch of government, the council, is not an appropriate way to go forward. And I think that we've seen the results of that. So I felt it was wholly appropriate to bring this issue up in the context of the recent annexation debacle and as an opportunity to bring our community together. Thank you.
Councilmember Edwards, do you have your light on to speak? Or, I'm not clear. There's a light on by your name, but not the red light. So,
Acting Mayor Clark, I pressed a button to speak. I didn't hear who the seconder was to the amendment.
Councilmember Block.
Thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
Okay, voter suppression. This is, the annexation issue had been put on the ballot after literally years of discussion. It was not something that came up out of the blue, and it wasn't something that came up at a meeting where you knew that two members who would oppose you would be gone. On August 6th, that's exactly what you did. Two of the members you knew would be opposing you were gone. Now, Mayor Bennett got out of his sick bed and came into the meeting specifically to be here for that vote for that might have turned out much differently. Frankly, when I joined this council, I wasn't prepared for this kind of underhanded dealing on the council. And now that I know what to expect from my esteemed fellow councilmen, I will try to be better prepared for that in the future. Throwing something up out of the blue, trying to put it on the ballot on a few months later is far different from what happened with the annexation vote. This is something, if it may be that the best thing for the city would be to reconsider its form of government. I personally doubt it, but there's been no study of this at all. There's been no comparison of the costs. There's been no consideration of what the election process would look like. There's been absolutely no consideration of that at all. And if we're going to start fooling around with the form of city government, I would like to propose that we divide the city into wards as allowed by state statute, so that council members will be elected to represent specific parts of the city, as opposed to the current system where everybody's elected at large, and we end up with the bulk of the council, 5 of the 7 members on the council being from one small area of the city. And frankly, I was going to bring that up when we start discussing our agenda for next year. Now that you've brought this out, I want to bring that forward. And I believe that has a lot more merit, giving representation for all parts of the city, making sure that no one in the city feels like they're left out. It has much more merit than an elected mayor. And while I'm at it, I got a call today from Quentin Thompson, who I think everybody knows. He's the fellow that shows up in the wheelchair sometimes. Asked me to convey his feelings. His words, he says, "I am outraged by one of the city council members on your team, Jack Block Jr. He has made some absurd and unethical statements to city council members as well as the city of Burien. He calls to eliminate Mike Martin's job and cut his budget in half. If Mike Martin's job were completely eliminated or even in half, he would not have the services in Burien. We would not have the services in Burien that we have today. He has presented and fought for. In fact, we would not be the city of Burien. If his position were cut, we would lose thousands of dollars. It would be a disaster that we only need to look at Norrie Park's recent history to bear warning. The fact that these items were brought up by Jack Block Jr. at the end of a meeting during closing, not at the appropriate time of new business, shows me his lack of respect for protocol and the citizens of our community, including those elected and seated this evening." Those are Quentin's exact words. He regretted that he couldn't be here tonight for this meeting, but he asked me to promise him that I would convey that to the council and the citizens, and I just don't know what else to say. I find Councilmember Block's actions to be reprehensible. Thank you.
Councilmember Hector.
I've been participating in Burien government as a citizen activist from 1993 on the former, on the planning commission, the first planning commission since 1995, and I've been on council since 2001. This ability of one council member or two to ignore the fact that we have always respected each other's opinion. We have come to the dais with our differences. We have discussed them as professionals. And all of a sudden, the one meeting I've missed in I don't know how long, all of a sudden, rules get changed indiscriminately because the number of opposing council members suddenly thought they had control of council. I think that shows very poor judgment on the part of some of my fellow council members. To speak to the motion that Councilmember Block has put forward, I would like to remind us that CTAC government has tried on 3 different occasions to change the form from a city manager to an elected mayor. It was done particularly for the person who brought that motion forward in order to be selected as mayor. It was very self-serving. I want to remind the Burien community that for 3 election cycles it has been unsuccessful, and CTAC still has a city manager form of government. I object to the statement made by Councilmember Block that Burien citizens did not want annexation. A minority, a very vocal minority, didn't want annexation. Some of you are here in the room tonight. I respect the fact that you brought the issue forward since 2006. It was up to the citizens of North Highline to say whether they wanted it or didn't. They chose not to. I hope you respect their decision and not hold it over the head of those of us who sit at this council dais and say, oh, well, now we know how wrong you were and how you aren't representing the citizens of Burien. I have represented the citizens of Burien since 1995 proudly. Why I would want to do it for that length of time is because I care about the community. I will continue to care about the community and not be bullied by one of my fellow council members. So as far as either the resolution, if that passes, or the motion that Mr. Block has stated, I am a very strong no vote on both. Thank you.
Seeing no more lights, are we ready to vote on the amendment, which is to put this in the form of another resolution?
Deputy Mayor, I think as city attorney, I need to address the amendment to the motion. It's not legally appropriate to take a motion and turn it into a resolution at a meeting. It needs to be in writing and follow the formal requirements for a resolution. So that's one point. The other point is that even if you could do that, as a general matter, this specific item, in order to go on the ballot, has to include in the resolution that does so a specifically worded ballot measure that has to be prepared in advance by the city attorney. So what the council could do is direct staff to prepare such a resolution and bring it back for the council's consideration.
But that would be a separate motion after we vote on the current motion.
It could be a separate motion, or it could be an amendment to the original motion.
Then do we strike this amendment and ask for another?
I'm just speaking to the legality of the amendment. I think it's on the floor, so you either have to vote on it, or the maker has to, and the seconder have to withdraw it.
So what is the path we have to follow here to get this in the proper form?
Make a motion authorizing or directing staff to prepare a resolution to put this matter on the ballot and bring it back to the council. But you don't have to rescind the first motion. You need to withdraw the amendment and replace it with an amendment to that effect.
Okay.
So as the maker of the motion, I withdraw my amendment and,
I withdraw my second.
okay, thank you. And then I make an amendment to direct staff to prepare a resolution. Thank you.
It needs a second.
Second.
And before we vote on this, I would like to point out to both of the council members to my right that this is something, a process that you obviously didn't understand, and would have been nice if you had worked it out ahead of time. That's what I meant by doing research. Councilmember Korea.
Thank you. So two points. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your information. And I think that 2013 is going to be a very interesting year. And then the information on forms of government. Federal Way did a very successful change of form of government, and they now have a strong mayor, council form of government. Black Diamond just voted to retain their elected mayor form of government. So approximately 80% of the cities are a strong, maybe a council form of government. I think Burien is maturing and is ready for a more sophisticated form of government. Thank you.
That is information that we will double check with staff as they do research if this motion passes. So, being no other items, I will ask for us to vote on the amendment.
The vote is 3-3, so it fails. Tie vote.
Thank you. And are we ready to vote on the main motion? Okay, register your votes, please.
Councilmembers Block and Ecker, could you re-vote? Thank you. Councilmember Ecker? That motion also fails. 3-3.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we move on to our next agenda item, which is a discussion of council policies and procedures. Mr. Martin, do you have some opening remarks?
I do, Deputy Mayor Clark. So, council had a number of study session topics that arose from the retreat that you had this year in January. This is not one of them. This came up subsequent to that, and just as a council request. The request was to examine the council policies and procedures. What you have in your packet is 2 documents, and I wanted to give you kind of a general, just a real quick overview here. First of all, for clarity this evening, I think it would be wise to note that both documents have not only the council packet numbers on them, but the numbers that were just in the council policies. And for clarity, I'm going to suggest that we always refer to the council packet in the lower right-hand corner. The other ones are in the center of the page in smaller font. The first document begins on page 3 and ends on page 65. That is the existing council policies without any changes, any alterations. That is them in a pristine state. And I included those so you could see what they were without any form of confusion. The second document begins on page 67 and ends on page 132. This document, if you look at that, if you just flip over there, you'll see it has just an awful lot of strikeout and some underlining and that sort of thing. I wanted to clarify what's going on in that document. When we looked at these policies, it was really clear, we'd known this for a while, that there were all kinds of policies and just kind of thrown into this. It was more a hodgepodge of policies that were in some vague way cobbled together. Many of them belonged in other areas. So, for example, financial policies were included in here. There were personnel policies. There were procurement policies, public records policies. All of these things have a discrete, appropriate place, and that is not in this document. And so what we did as staff is we went through these and we struck out and moved these to the appropriate place. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I want to make it clear that the strikeouts you usually associate with deletions. These are not deletions. They're deleted from this document, but this stuff is all moved to the appropriate document. So we didn't go through and just take out a whole bunch of language that was supposed to evaporate and go nowhere. It's now embodied somewhere else. That place, just for ease, if you look on council packet page 161, Monica put together a little, a very brief matrix that at a high level describes where this stuff moved to by and large. Finally, the only other changes that you'll see in this document are changes that were intended to reflect current council policies. So there were things in here that were anachronisms. They were obsolete, hadn't been used for many, many years. And what we did was replace those with the actual council practices
which you're free to change if that's what you want to do. As another kind of an overarching note, I wanted to remind council that these are just policies, these are not laws. Policies are intended to guide council, and they're generally the rules that we all agree that will work by. They're not binding in the sense of nobody goes to jail if for some reason they aren't followed. In my tenure here and in other places, I was telling Craig this earlier, I've always defaulted towards what made sense in a given situation. There are just too many unique situations to codify them in a meaningful sort of way that isn't so convoluted as to render them meaningless. So what I just intend to emphasize here is that these are policies. They're here to serve you. They're not here to make your life more complicated or to, to get into some sort of arcane wrangling about procedures. They are intended just to help streamline your processes. And with that, we're willing to take your direction on this. And as you've done with other documents recently, probably the easiest tonight, if you kind of take us, staff, through this, and we can begin a matrix with your thoughts, and we come back with you later. There's a lot of stuff here, and we're glad to take a crack at it that way. There's no urgency towards this, so we can take as long as council wants to take. With that, we'll be glad to take your direction.
I have several lights on for council members, but our attorney has his light on, so I would like to hear from him first.
I'm sorry, that was from the previous discussion, but I would make one comment in addition to what the city manager indicated with regard to the modified draft that the staff has put in your packet. Removing a lot of those policies that Mike referred to would be consistent with the way most city councils' rules of procedure are written. Mostly council rules of procedure deal with your meeting processes and related matters. But if the council would like to include some of these policies that staff thought should be deleted because they appear elsewhere, in some cases have even been adopted separately by resolution of council, we could include those as attachments to your rules of procedure, so that's something else you could consider if you prefer to do it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and one other thing I want to mention, and there'll be nothing and nothing. One of the things that we added here as an attachment, you'll see it as attachment A, is the RCW 35-1320 or whatever that is, discussing the city manager council form of government as a reference. And then that bumped what was attachment A to attachment E, which Councilmember Edker had sent an email asking me about, and I hope I didn't over-clarify that email that I responded. Attachment B is the old attachment.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Clark.
Well, I didn't press my button.
Actually, I think the button stayed on after the last vote.
I think we did too. But I pressed mine because I have a question for Mr. Martin.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Martin, I just want clarification. The one that's page 3 through 66 is exactly the same as 67 through 132. It's just that one has strikeouts and the other one does not.
Yes, the first document is exactly the same book. The first document is the document as it exists today with no action. The second document is this document modified per the way we just discussed, mostly having to do with strikeouts, and in some cases having to reflecting current council policy.
So
Very
can
little
I
difference.
consider this a staff recommendation now?
You know, I really consider this to be I have my ideas about how to do this. I think this is more something council is interested in.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I didn't need to be flipping between the two. So if I work with the documents starting on page
Yeah.
67,
I think
I'm part
that's,
of the discussion.
yeah, I think the easiest way is to work with the document starts in 67, and if you want to see if there was something, how it might have been changed for whatever reason, you go back to the first document.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Dakota.
I have several questions, comments, so I think I'll do a few and then let other council members comment and then come back. So on page 7 section 2.1A, it's been added where it states resolutions. I was wondering if we could actually get a copy of those resolutions, number 3, and amended by resolution 3/1935 of 71.
Do you want all of those resolutions?
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, and just so you know, I talked to Monica about this, and she included these for your reference. When we actually do this, these parenthetical clauses won't be in there. We're glad to provide those resolutions.
Could we do it via email rather than paper copy?
You know, if council is willing to keep the documents that we're going to be providing you meeting after meeting, it might be easier just to have the paper document in front of you. We're glad to do that.
Well, I was gonna ask if there's a link on the city website where us and other people could go and pull these up and see them.
I'll reconfirm that.
So
I
we,
believe all resolutions are on there.
but we're glad to provide the paper document as well.
Okay, Councilmember, you have more?
Thank you, yes. On page 75, it also mentions a reference to RCW 42.30.110(2). That's in 2.5, number 5. So I was wondering if I could get a copy of that.
Sure.
Thank you. And then on page 75, under roll call, it reads that the mayor shall indicate any council member who's not in attendance and whether or not the council member has an excused absence. I was wondering what the history behind that is, and do we really need to be excused, or can we just be noted that we're absent?
This was, there's no history per se. This is strictly what was in, has been in the document for years and years. If you'd like to change it, we certainly can.
Yeah.
I have a question on that subject for the city attorney. Isn't it a requirement that the absence be excused, and if there's a certain number of absences and council member that are unexcused, the council member can be terminated?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so this is.
Can we have that information then? Because I was under the understanding that there was no attendance requirement for council. I know there is for planning commissioners, but I was not aware of any for council members, so if we can have that clarified.
Sure.
Thank you. And then, last one, and then I'll take a break, is, page 77. The order of, the regular council meeting agenda under 2.6. The city business is what we're calling it now. It used to be called the city manager, section. It is, listed or mentioned in the council reports. It says council members may also provide written reports to the city manager's report. Can we have that added into the regular council meeting agenda? I think that's a very important part of our.
Sure. What is it you look at?
The city business or city manager section. It used to be called city manager report, and it got changed to city business report. And it's not listed on the items for the regular council meeting agenda.
Sure, a couple items, if that's council's will, of course. Second of all, understand that the city manager's, so-called city manager's report generally turns into a place where council members are actually doing most of the talking, and that's why it was changed to city business. But if council would like to change that in some fashion, we certainly can. We could add that to the matrix for future
That'd be great.
discussion.
And it's, the city manager's report is referenced throughout this document, so this is not the only place that it's mentioned.
No, I understand. I was just explaining why it was changed to
Yeah.
city business.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'll take a break.
Councilmember Ray.
Thank you. I agree with the recommendation to release the draft on removing a number of those sections, like the advisory boards and the things that were obviously included in other resolutions or ordinances. There are a couple sections, though, I would like to address, and one of them starts on page 70. I address on page 70, and that is section 16. council business policies. Currently, the draft shows that all three of those subsections under section 16.
Are you on page 69?
I'm sorry, 69, good. 169. Section 16, council business policies, shows that all of those have been removed. And the reason, I agree with 16.2, 16.3, those are already covered in financial policy. So I'll explain. The only note that was mentioned in the matrix that the city clerk put together on 16.1 was that litigation policies and reporting have not been followed in the past. I would like to have that added back and have it part of the meeting structure. Because I think the council's understanding of litigation that's ongoing or underway or recently concluded helps us better understand what monetary impacts those may or may not have on the overall budget.
So could we add that to the matrix as a suggestion? Okay.
And then on page 119, section 19, the city manager evaluation process. This one has been completely removed, and the notes on page 161 again say that this process has been included on human resources. So it's not clear what document or where that is. So I would like staff to provide the council with a copy of those steps. And I just see if the 8 steps that are located on page 119 are actually included in the process that currently resides in human resources somewhere. And if they're not, I would like to move that those 8 steps should be made in this particular document.
They should be remain in the document.
Yes, if they're not, it's just in the human resources document. And I'd like to go back to page 75, 2.6 on roll call. Items, page 75, section 2.6. And that was under the roll call. I understand the explanation for having the word excused in there. However, I'm not sure what the purpose of having council members vote on whether or not an absent is excused, as indicated in the last sentence of that section.
This refers back to the same RCW that will be responsive to Councilmember Krakowiak's question. The RCW actually states that a council position shall become vacant if 3 consecutive regular meetings are missed without being excused by the council. It's actually the council that has that prerogative to excuse absences. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so does this motion to excuse happen at every meeting then?
To be consistent with the RCW, that would be correct. But it doesn't really come into play unless there's 3 consecutive meetings that are missed. So it would be most important on the 3rd meeting, I suppose, or I suppose you could go back, and if there was a question, you could excuse prior absences by motion of council that which that hadn't been done.
That wasn't really clear. That's really, I will come back to it later.
Okay, to address that last thing first, I got a completely different impression. When I read it, I thought it was fairly clear that what happens, you go to section 11, and if you get the absent, you notify the mayor, and presumably you would provide the explanation, and the mayor could decide whether you would be excused or put it up to a vote. If you didn't call the mayor in advance, then the council, say somebody got into an accident on the way to the meeting or something, then the council could vote to excuse the absence. Or if
Steve?
That's page 97. That's about reporting on litigation policies. I just think we need to be really careful about what we put in for requirement there, because there's only so much you can say without getting into things that should be only discussed in executive session.
Is that all, Councilmember?
Yes.
I agree with that. Specifically, the language doesn't say what kind of meeting it should be done. So there is some protection. That's right.
I think we can do an executive session once we do that report.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other lights, so I would like to offer one that I looked for and couldn't find. But I think it probably goes in the financial policies now instead of this document. And that is to create a policy that we would purchase locally as much as we can. I know we can't purchase everything locally, but office supplies, that sort of thing. We do have a business here in town, and so I would like to explore a policy like that. And Councilmember Jacobiak.
Thank you. I'll do my next set of questions and comments. On page 76, under correspondence for the record, there's 4 lines that have been added, and in the original guidelines, there was just the heading, correspondence for the record. I'm concerned that what's been added is, could be restrictive, and I would prefer that the council sees all correspondence for the record, whether it's deemed inappropriate or not, or sent anonymously. I think some people have concerns about being identified, and so anonymous is what they feel most comfortable communicating with us in that form. So I would ask that we put that on the grid, that we just have the heading and not include those 4 lines below.
I'd like to comment on that. Yeah, I have concerns about our email and what is sent, what is forwarded to us. I think that we should receive all items that are sent to the council. What is put into the record is a separate issue. I don't think that anonymous items should be added to the record. However, I think it's appropriate for us to receive our mail. Also, as far as editing of the comments, I think the only thing that should be edited are profanity. Beyond that, I feel that people have a right to express their opinion, and if they want to do so, I think they should be allowed to do so.
Councilmember Jacobiak.
Yes, thank you. Page 76, under consent agenda, I would prefer that we do not add what's in red. It's on the consent agenda, includes but not limited to minutes, vouchers, or other matters. I think other matters speak to including ordinances and resolutions, and I would hope that this does not start a precedence where after discussion, the item automatically goes on the consent agenda. And then, one more, and I'll take a break. On page 76, under public hearings and discussion, there has been some citizens that have contacted me wondering about public hearings, and if a vote will be taken the same day that a person testifies in a public hearing for legislative decisions, and I would ask that we include that under public hearings and discussion,
concerning the email to the council, I agree also that there should be no censorship of what comes into the email to the council, but also I'm concerned about the word where it says it's inappropriate. My question is, who defines inappropriate? But moving on to move to the one on page, has to do with the legislative and the meeting types of the various public hearings. What page is that on again?
Well, the one that I've mentioned is on page 76, but I think there's a whole section on public hearings.
Yes, page 90. Okay, thank you. Page 93. Thank you for adding the types and making a clarification between the different kinds of public hearings. I think that's great. I have a question though on the section on page 93, which talks about citizens wishing to comment, and that would follow the same procedure, etc. I would recommend its current placement appears to apply only to quasi-judicial public hearings. I would had a couple recommendations, but the easiest one might be to move that section under section 12.1 on the discussion of types, because it does talk about public may comment on hearing items, and then it would look like that's appropriate for both kinds of hearings. On page 79, this might be a nit, but if you're a person in the community that doesn't have computer access and wants to have a chance to look at the city packet before the meeting on Monday, I would recommend that the city hall closes at 5 p.m. What's the point of saying that the materials can be picked up at city hall? If someone was to come here and try to pick it up as long as it's closed. So I would recommend maybe 4 or 4:30, which allows someone to get computer access for one to come to city hall, pick up the materials, and we just won't find the gate closed.
So that's 3.8.
3.8. The last line says, well, at 5 p.m. on a Friday prior to the meeting, the city hall closes at 5 p.m. So it's virtually impossible for anyone to really get to those. On page 79, 3.2. On line 1, the proposed agenda schedule will be reviewed as the first item discussion at the fourth Monday study session. I think we've kind of determined that happens during the regular meeting. So I would suggest that it read, the proposed agenda schedule will be reviewed during the last regular council meeting of each month. I think that's what we do during the scheduled meetings, not during the study session. On page 89 and 90. On page 89, number 7, the very last sentence states, unless specifically requested, other council members' mail shall not be open before distribution to those council members. When we flip over to the next page, number 8, it says, the city clerk shall not open mail addressed to individual council members. I'm wondering, is there a duplication there?
Okay. Usually the student welcome.
Which is hard to do on an email.
True.
page 124, section 22. This is entitled Appointments to Regional Organizations. The first sentence states that appointments to regional bodies, ad hoc committee committees, and other special committees, etc. And then it has it has 6 different stipulations under 22.1, but they all refer to regional committee, a regional body, but none of them explain how assignments are made to committee, ad hoc committees, or special committee. So it's
So encompass a procedure for something other than regional.
other than regional. I'll take your break and let some other people participate.
Correspondence is directed to the council, even if it is abusive or inappropriate or whatever. But I believe strongly that anonymous items should not be made part of the public record. And neither should anything that discloses personal information about any person, like social security numbers, or information that that person doesn't want disclosed publicly, or anything that's abusive, which I would take as being just that. Profanity, insults, any libelous matter, we should not be making that part of the public record. On the consent agenda, frankly, I don't see any problem with consent agendas handled now. I wrote on the public hearings materials here, and then I kind of lost track of what I was thinking on that. The suggestion for that other section there, maybe that could just be made like 12.4.
Public hearing.
Yeah, so for the public comment section, so it's a separate section of the same, separate subsection. Section 3.8. That's on page 79. I would suggest that we can make those available at the library. That's open later on Fridays and it's open over the weekend. It's right downstairs.
We do that now.
That's done now, so maybe we should make that part of the policy so that it's clear for the public. And then page 124. There's not any changes proposed for that, and as far as regional committees are concerned, they have their own procedures for how people get appointed to them, and then the city council has been, it doesn't come up very often if there's an ad hoc community or special community, and when it does, it appears that the city council has handled it just fine. The last one I remember was the Shoreline Management Program Committee, which went through a discussion and a vote here on the council. And I thought that process went just fine. I don't think we need to change these procedures at all. So that's all I have to say right now.
Councilmember Burien.
Thank you. So over on page 124, some of the old guidelines had committees, and that has all been stricken from the document. But 22.2 has a reference to the council committee, and I believe that 22.2, because we no longer use a committee form of advisory information, that can be deleted from that page.
So you're suggesting deleting 22.2?
Correct. And back to page 78.
So just to be clear,
Yeah.
so that has to do with the regional, as I read that, I think that's, like, if you're interested in the, whatever, Highland Forum, you're welcome to go. I think that this doesn't get to a particular committee per se. I just want to be clear on what you're saying. Are you saying,
I felt we could go to any meetings that we want to as a council member, but this is council committee membership.
okay,
I think it's pertaining to
I
that.
just want to make sure we.
Yeah. Thank you. Page 78, back to page 78. For the order of study session agenda, the correspondence for the record portion of that agenda listing has been stricken, and I would recommend that we put that back in. I think that having correspondence for the record in our packets as often as possible gives us timely information from citizens, and it's I would appreciate having us consider keeping that in. Thank you. Page 80, some wordsmithing. On section 4.8, shall was changed to will, and maybe this is checking in with the attorney. I was thinking that shall is stronger, and that I would rather have shall than will.
I agree with you that shall is stronger, but I think what we were thinking when we recommend changing it to will is that these are council guidelines rather than formal rules. So, and even Roberts itself, if you read them cover to cover, and particularly the intent behind them, they're not intended to be used to be followed to the letter all the time. So we thought that will was more consistent with that approach. But if you prefer shall, we can do that.
Yes, I'd love to have it on the grid so that we can consider that. Thank you.
I would like to make a comment on that last comment.
Are you done, Councilmember?
I'll go ahead and let,
I'm still thinking.
I have more, but I'll go ahead and let Jerry make a comment.
Well, I just wanted to, the distinction between shall and will was one of those things that in Boston, there's a bunch of other terms like that that have been kind of losing their meaning in legal writing, but I prefer to stick with the will for the same reason that the attorney put forward, that for most people at least, it's a little less mandatory than shall and allows a little bit of room to be flexible, which the city council may want to exercise from time to time.
Did you have one? Councilmember Edgar?
Thank you. There shall and will, according to recent ruling by both management board that I happened to see when I was doing a little research tonight, essentially equated will and shall as being equal in their eyes. But what I would bring up is that on page 4.8, I'm sorry, page 80, 4.8, whatever word we use, whether it's shall or will, it should be consistent because that same sentence is used on page 84, 6.21. And so in one area it says shall, in the other area it says will. And the remainder of the comments I have are more wordsmithing. I'd be more than happy to just put them in an email and send them to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Edgar. Councilmember Krokoviac?
Thank you. Page 82, I was under the impression, as I'm reading this document, the changes, that the little lines on the side, on the left column, that's to indicate a change. And there are a couple lines throughout the document that there aren't any changes, so 6.1 and 6.5 are two examples, 6.17, so I was wondering if you could help me.
We'll get rid of them if there are no changes.
Okay, so there's several throughout the document.
It's helpful, I have a copy of this document when I was first appointed to the council, before any changes were made. And
Yeah, we have.
It doesn't appear that these lines actually indicate any changes.
I was
We'll
under
clean
the
'em up.
impression that they do, so maybe we could get a little course on how to read the strikeout and additions. On page 86, section 8, number 10, I was wondering if we could put in a couple additional words. So right now it reads, share information with council members on meetings, issues, etc. that the mayor has received as part of his or her official status as mayor. If we could add in, or consider adding in, that the mayor has received, conducted, or participated in as part of his or her official status as mayor, helping the rest of the council know how the mayor is representing the council. Thank you. So, I have more, but if someone else wants to speak,
No, proceed.
thank you. I just have a couple more. Thank you for your indulgence. So on page 95, with the age of technology, section 14, council representation 14.4, it's asking that as a matter of courtesy, council members share with the full council what they're putting out there for communication. And instead of at the end, it says in council agenda packet prior to publication, so the council members may be aware of the impending publication, because we now have blogs and internet. I was wondering if we could strike the last portion of that sentence, and after the comma, have it read, should be presented to the full council at the time of communication.
So it'd be like copy an email or a blog post to the council.
Yeah, just give it, give a heads up and say, I'm doing this. I think the content would be good, especially if it's controversial nature or in the minority community. I would appreciate it.
I like that.
I have one more. Just wordsmithing on page 120, section 20, 20.3. We've gotten rid of most of the dates in this document, but this one could be struck out. According to a motion passed by the council on January 10th, 1994, the deputy mayor shall be elected to a one-year term. And those are all the comments I have right now. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other council members wanting to speak, do you folks have the direction that you need?
Yeah, so what we'll do is, I don't know whether we'll be able to be responsive by your next council. The council will have an idea of when they wanted to see these back. Or we have our next study session is at the end of the month, and it's
Yes, it's now a regular meeting, and we're going to put it here.
right, and then in January, we have a public hearing scheduled.
Yes, we do.
So, what's council's pleasure in terms of receiving this? You want to have it back in the regular, council meeting?
I wasn't able to hear what Monica said.
Excuse me, there's a public hearing for the study, what used to be a study session next month, and so it's moved to a regular meeting, recall. Be named.
So I'd like to see this on our regular meeting agenda then, for
Okay,
further
in that case,
discussion.
if you're comfortable with that, we'll see what we can do to put the beginnings of the matrix together, and we'll have 2 days. We'll see if we can get something back to you for your next meeting, but it's a pretty short turnaround, so it's more likely you'll see this later in December. Okay?
Since we will, not have the full council until January, is that correct? Councilmember Middleton?
We'll move on the 3rd, and when's the next, there'll be a meeting on the 17th, 3rd and 17th? I will not be here for either of those meetings.
So then I would rather have a discussion, the next discussion of council policies when all council members are present, which would be until January.
Very soon, so if that's what you guys would like, we can put them on your first meeting in January. If that's what you want to do.
I don't view this as a time to matter, so I think we can pull it over to January.
John, you hear that? Got arrested. Okay, so we'll put this on your agenda for the first meeting in January, if that's convenient.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to item C, this is a discussion of study session topics and our retreat dates. Does anybody have any comments? Councilmember Kirkowski.
So one more time, explain the public hearing in December and when our next study session will be.
Thank you. I do believe the next study session is in March. We have a public hearing next month for the comp plan,
Okay.
and then we have
No,
a
the
public,
public hearing isn't.
oh, it's,
I thought the
This
public
is
hearing was
November, so-
January.
yes, it's in January. And then February is the public hearing for the SMP.
Okay. So we could have a study session in December.
Christmas Eve. Yes, we
I'm not coming in on Christmas Eve.
So, oh, Councilmember.
Mike Barton and City Attorney Craig Knudsen and I have been talking about the proposed solid waste interlocal agreement that's to come before the council in January. And Mr. Martin said he'd get it on the council schedule. Did that happen?
It's item number 7.
Okay. And for those of you who may not be Authorization Horizon, so they're asking to extend the interlocal agreement to 2040. And the city will present an agenda bill to bring this forward. And Mr. Knudsen isn't following this issue and has attended a meeting and will attend a meeting. So it can be presented other than by me, which I think is appropriate. Mr. Knudsen?
That comes back in January though, right? Doesn't-
I think it comes to the city mid-December, and then it will be presented to the council early January with a very short horizon. I think it has a 1-month turnaround that we have to get it back to the King County Solid Waste Division.
Yes, what we're hearing from the other cities is represented by the Suburban Cities Organization, is that they'd like us to turn it around by February. So we do have it scheduled to bring to you at 2 meetings in January to try to make sure that you have enough time to review it. Neon is also going to be attending 1 or more meetings next month on this, because I'm going to be gone for 10 days in early December.
It's a fairly complicated, convoluted kind of agreement that the Municipal Solid Waste Advisory Committee has been working on for 18 months through much conversation. SCA got involved, and they have convened a group of 5 city managers, and now I think it's going to city attorneys for a review of the language. It has, probably the biggest sticking point has been environmental liability for Cedar Hills landfill closure. What would happen if there was a major event that caused the landfill to fail? Would it be possible for the solid waste division to come back to city's general funds for some sort of contributory financial involvement? So it's something that probably we won't get into a very deep discussion on it in order to adopt it or not adopt it. But I just want to advise the council, it's well worth reading to make sure that if you have questions, you bring them forward.
Councilmember Edgar?
Thank you. On review the study session topics, I'm not really sure now when the next study session is going to be. It's going to be until March. Maybe these need to be put on a different meeting schedule. The one thing I thought would be appropriate for study session topics is one that we still haven't worked with yet, and that's a community rec center, and see what if there's anything we can be doing on that. It's still listed as something to talk about. We haven't talked about it yet. I also thought about if we were, again, assuming we're going to have a study session at the beginning of the year, it would be nice maybe for the council to be part of working with this economic development director to look at what strategies or what information we might like to see come out of the contract that we have with the consultant, as far as what things we might like to see, information we'd like to have as a result of the study, as far as strategies that we might use. There's some way we could be involved in scoping, doing some sort of scoping, yeah, or at least get a sense of what to expect, and if there's something we think should be added, we have that opportunity before the contract goes out. And I also had the same kind of comment on, I know that we have a scope of work that may be going out on the CARES audit, if there's anything that the council would like to see come back. Also, if there's some way that we could be involved with that. And again, I thought that those might have been good study session meetings, but I think waiting until March for those might be a little bit.
Yeah, the carriage is coming back in February, that's already, that's a document.
So maybe we could add those during January sometime.
Yeah. Let's see what we can do. The CARES operational studies are the scope of work that's been negotiated with the contractor that I mentioned the last time. The strategic plan, we haven't even gone out to RFPs yet, so that we can certainly involve council with that if you'd like to.
Councilmember Burien?
Thank you. And without a study session until March, maybe some of these items can be brought up at the retreat. And I was wondering, could you remind me how we selected the person that's going to do the audit for CARES?
I brought a couple of city managers, or city manager item, I don't have the date in front of me, and then 2 meetings ago, I mentioned again that it was my intent to hire Mayor Bennett, stopped and made sure everybody was clear on that. Councilmember Block asked that if we do this, we do it in February, not in December, and council by consensus agreed.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other comments, did you have any closing remarks?
No, I think that would be fine, thank you.
Okay, I just have one, and that is that there was a meeting of the King County Library Planning Committee a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I've forgotten exactly when, and I went to that, and they are talking, the staff recommendation to their board is to move the library north of where it is right now. So it would physically be leaving the city of Burien where it is right now, and it would be moved into the unincorporated area. The problem I see with that is they're doing it with the intention that if Seattle was to come down and annex, which Seattle has not expressed a desire to do. But if they were to do that, then our citizens in current Burien that use that facility and have been paying on the bond that they voted on to enhance a facility that they could use, might lose the ability to lose that. So I would like to see them consider moving it south so that current residents of both areas could use it. There was a new person on their board who felt that she wanted to hear from community members. So there might be some sort of public meeting at some point before they make their decision. They're having a meeting tomorrow night, and I would like to go. And as it stands right now, I would represent myself. Unless there are council members that feel the same way I do, in this case, I would represent the council.
I'd be willing to have you represent the council to express our interest in keeping the library. I'm planning to attend that also.
Okay, then I would be representing the council. Yes, okay.
I have no problem with that. I would like to say that I'd like to see the library made in its present location. I think that's the expectation of the community, and I think it's the best place for that.
And I totally agree with that. He expressed concern, Mr. Potasic expressed concern about it being in that location because it would be too close to the Seattle border. And so his recommendation is to move it north with the expectation that he could sell it to Seattle if they were to annex. And that's where I think the people in our community get a little bit shortchanged, so that was my concern. If they would leave it where it is, I would be very happy.
I don't think Seattle's going to move forward with annexation. And as far as in the best interest of the community and the library system, I think that the present location is the one that's best suited. So I hope that's the opinion that's expressed.
And hopefully, this new board member will be successful in getting them to come out into the community and hear from people. So, anything else for the good of the order? Or then I would entertain a motion for adjournment. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn.